preserve the history of the Black Knights, we have listened to recordings from past seasons in search of drum solos. We have found two which we will play today. The first is from 1955, the Black Knights' second competitive year. The name of the solo is Modern Syncopation. The composer is J. Burns Colby, who may or may not have had anything to do with drum corps. The solo was published in a collection of drum solos in 1955. The tempo is slower than usual, about 104 beats per minute, not the normal 128. This is not a flashy snare drum feature. It could have been played as the chords marched into position for special presentations, such as concert. For you younger people, a concert was when chords stopped and played at any tempo it wanted. It might not have been a drum feature at all, but it is a catchy little drum beat and part of our history. Here is Modern Syncopation. I am happy to tell you that there are two snare drummers from the 1955 snare drum line who are still alive. One of them is in the audience today, Dan Chenoweth. Dan, would you please let us know that you're here? I think he was here earlier. Ralph Moggin is the other 55 snare drummer. He is not here today, but he is at home in Arizona. Ralph was the drum instructor of the Black Knights in 1955. He taught from his playing position in the drum line, as was the tradition for many years with the Black Knights. We did not hire a big-name instructor from out of town. We didn't have the money. As we look back on the situation now, we aren't really sure that we knew that importing an expert instructor was even an option. Our second Black Knight drum solo is from 1957. The first year we had tenor drums. These tenor drums were simply snare drums without snares, played with felt mallets. This piece is not a snare drum solo, but a snare tenor duet. It was played at standard marching tempo. The instructor at the time was Dan Kamler, who was also the composer of this ensemble composition. There was also a bass drum part, but we will omit that today. Here from 1957 is the Black Knight Echo drum solo. We are fortunate to have in the audience today one of the snare drummers from 1957 who played the solo you just heard in competition. Bob Krause, please let us know where you are so they can be recognized.
Right here.
Great job. While we are introducing people, let me reintroduce the drummers
Did they get it right,
you are
Bob?
hearing today. Our ancient and honorable drummers of the Black Knights. And I'm sorry, fellas, but Jim's making me give your age again. I'm sorry about that. From the most ancient to the least ancient, we have Jim Middleton, almost 79, from there, lived near Atlanta. Roger Willis, almost 77, from near Houston. John Gaggage, 68, and Dan Etling, 68. John and Dan found out that they were working on preparing for this event today, and that they lived within a few miles of each other near Minneapolis. They didn't know that before they started drumming together again. Our youngest ancient is Randy Hagee, who just turned 39.
Thank you. Times what?
Yeah.
In 1961, we had a very good snare line and a very good rudimental bass drummer. It was decided that it would be a good time to enter the competition held by the VFW for drum quartets. The piece that was played was really a duet played by 3 unison snare drums and a rudimental bass. The 3 snare drummers were Dan Kamler, who passed away in 2003, Joel West, who is here today,
Hey, Joe!
and Jim Middleton, who is also here today, somewhere. Has anybody seen Jim? Oh, yeah.
Paying attention.
The bass drummer was Albert Hall, who left us in 2010. The contest was held in Miami. The music bears the extraordinary title, Miami 61. It was written by Jim Middleton and Dan Kamler. The ensemble of the 4 snare drummers from 1963 who played at the 2018 reunion played a portion of the snare part, which we will now play. Here is the ending portion of Miami 61. This next part is called Solo with an Unpronounceable Name.
What?
There was a lot of music circulating in the late 60s and early 70s. The recordings of the Black Knights from that era contained many drum solos. Unfortunately, no one had the foresight to save any of it. The only way we can reproduce any music from that time is to transcribe it from the recordings. However, sometimes the drummer remembers a solo. That's how we got the next piece. One of our drummers remembered playing it. Teenage boys sometimes apply names which only they understand. And sometimes they should be the only ones who understand the names of some of the things that they name. Rather than asking one of our guys who just wants to be a teenager again to explain the real name of this short solo and having to make up a story for his granddaughter on the spur of the moment, we are calling the piece The Drum Solo with the Unpronounceable Name. It was composed by Dave Ringel, who was the drum instructor of the Black Knights for several years during the 60s and 70s. Here it is. There were many drum corps all over the country during the 50s and 60s. 2 areas of the country that a lot of them were located were the Midwest and the East Coast. One of the perennial strong corps from the East was the Garfield Cadets from Garfield, New Jersey. We have a solo that was played by Garfield in 1963. This solo, composed by Les Parks, the drum instructor of the Cadets at the time, is distinctive because of the way it fools the listener near the end. All the drum corps solos you have heard us play today have sounded like a series of street beats. They might sound fancy, not the simple kind of drum beat that would be used in a parade, but almost everything from that period was a 16-count unit and felt like a street beat. Well, This isn't one of those. Oh, sorry, Jim. This is one of those. I'm sorry. Well, this one isn't put together in the normal way. On paper, the right number of counts of music is present for 3 street beats, but the rhythm is organized so that the listener loses grasp of exactly where the 16-count phrase really is. The last part of the solo has left many people wondering what just happened. Here is the 1963 solo from the Garfield Cadets. Now the guys are going to do a Crazy Army reprise. Now we're going to return to the ancient style of drumming. Those of you who heard our first program might remember that the music in the style is slower than what you have been listening to, and that the rolls sound faster and compressed. We will have a major presentation for you in a moment, but first, because this music is so different from what drummers are accustomed to playing, we want to play again Ed Lumley's Crazy Army that was played in our first performance. Here is the short version of that short piece. The Drummers and Fifers Guide, first published in 1862 during the Civil War, is both an instruction book and a collection of military music from the Civil War period. It was compiled by George Bruce and Daniel Emmett. Bruce was the drummer who composed the Army 2-4, which was played in our first program. The Army 2-4 was a standard drum beat which could fit several popular tunes of the day. The Drummers and Fifers Guide is a collection of popular tunes with music from the for fifes and drum beats, which can be played along with those tunes. There is a lot of doubt now about how much of the music in this collection was used for military purposes. The book became very popular among civilians after the war. One of the popular tunes of the day, which was included in this book, was The Downfall of Paris. Now, everybody knew the tune. In the early days of their work, Dan Emmett was the fifer of the pair. Later in his career, Emmett learned to drum and is credited with creating the snare drum part, which now fits only that tune and which has become the standard still played today. Snare drummers think of this piece as a snare drum solo, but really it's an accompaniment to a song. Emma was also a composer. Several popular tunes, one of which was Dixie, which most people think as a folk song. In case anyone is interested, the first edition copy of the Drummers Fifers Guide is available on Amazon for an amazing price of $164.99, with only a $3.99 delivery charge. Hey, it's a first edition. And by the way, Jim made me say this, and it's part of what he's paying me for. The Downfall of Paris is probably the best known drum solo from any tradition. Almost every drummer has played it. There are many versions on YouTube. Our drummers are ready to play it for you now. Ladies and gentlemen, The Downfall of Paris.
Hey.
Before we present our last number, our drummers would like to thank you for your kind attention to our efforts. They are delighted to have had the opportunity to play for you today. Anyone who thinks the best senior tour from 1960s usually thinks of first the Hawthorne Caballeros. They seem to have the best in every area, including drums. They played a snare drum feature on the famous record they made in 1961. The solo, known as The Bomb, has become famous and is still played by Hawthorne's alumni corps. It was written by their instructor at the time, Les Parks, another of the very influential instructors of that era. Les Parks was also the instructor of the Garfield Cadets and was the composer of the solo played by Garfield in 1963, which our drummers played just a short time ago. This solo is probably the most famous of all drum solos composed for drum corps. Ladies and gentlemen, we close our program with The Bomb. Ladies and gentlemen, we hope you have enjoyed the presentation of the ancient and honorable drummers of the Black Knights. For the next event in this afternoon's entertainment, the brass ensemble that played at the dedication ceremony this